This is Still Talking Black, a show where we discuss things affecting Blackness from a Black point of view. I'm your host, Richard Dodds, and today I'm joined by Chris Wilson. Chris Wilson has 20 plus years of experience in the information technology and also franchising industries. We talk about the things that you need to know if you're considering opening up a franchise, because some of the stuff I didn't even know is crazy. I really want to open up a franchise, so this was very good information for me. Again, this episode is available on YouTube, but it's also available wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So without further ado, here's Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Wilson. I am a franchise investor, and I also run a franchise consulting firm where I help people figure out the best franchise for them to invest in and show them how to get in and get out safely. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Did you say get out safe?
Yep, get in and get out. That's the name of the game.
That's awesome, man. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate you, man.
Well, so what got you initially? What initially got you into franchises? Like, what was your first franchise? Tell me about like your first story.
So my first franchise story was I was 14 years old, getting ready to work for the first time.
Wow.
And got my little minimum wage job at a company called Carvel Ice Cream Bakery. They're real big in the Northeast, ice cream store. So what was interesting, was that the guy that owned it, he was pretty young. He's about 25, 30 years old. At 14, I didn't know that you could own a business that old. Like, I just thought that you had to be, much older and richer, right? So I was trying to figure out how he got into business ownership at such a young age. And it turns out that his father was a very rich man. And when his kids turned 25, he would gift them a business. Wow. 9 times out of 10 a franchise, because he just liked how franchises run and you could take it and duplicate it and things like that. And so basically he told his kids, listen, this is your shot. If you run this well, you can turn it into an empire. If you are silly and run it into the ground, well, I gave you your shot, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. My father was not a rich man, and he did not own a chain of jewelry stores like this guy did. So I had to figure out another way to get involved in franchising. But that was my entrance to it at 14 years old.
That's like way earlier than I thought that you say. Like, I mean, maybe 20, like at the youngest, but you said 14.
14.
And it sounds like that one conversation kind of like redirected maybe where you thought you were going.
Yeah, so, it was weird because I was introduced to it, but I didn't know how to get involved. I thought that you had to be a millionaire. And so my plan at the time was to go to college, get a good corporate job, work as hard as I can, and save up $1 million. Well, that never happened, as you could imagine, right? Like, it just, life isn't set up that way. So through conversations and networking, I came across some folks, and one of my mentors was actually in franchising, and I called him and said, hey, listen, I want to get in franchising, but I don't have $1 million. Is it even worth us having a conversation? And at that point, he just opened my eyes to all of the different industries, all of the different investment levels in franchising. And then from there, like, there was a little crack in the door, so I kicked it open.
It's like that seems like such a scary thing. So when you invested in your first franchise, how old were you at that time?
So my first one, I was 35. So I waited a little bit past 14, right?
Okay. It's hard to get capital when you're 14.
Very hard to get capital, hard to convince a bank to loan you some money, hard to get a landlord to give you some space. So yeah. Yeah. So I was saying this, it's like so much about inclusion, right? I'm a Black kid from Brooklyn. I knew literally nothing about Pilates, but was able to leverage transferable skills with a franchise that knew what the hell they were doing, right? So, but, I had to create a space where people who maybe were interested in it, heard about it, didn't know too much about it, felt okay to come in, right? And that, a lot of it starts with your marketing, right? If you have all marketing material that looks or caters to a certain demographic, how comfortable are people outside of that demographic going to feel, right? And so I was able to work with I'll give you an example, man. I had this at a marketing company that used to do my graphics on Instagram and things like that. And I remember I was being a sponsor for a HBCU and for a D9 fraternity, right? Mm-hmm. And I asked them to create a full page ad. I gave them the verbiage, asked them to throw some pictures in and make it look nice. And they came up with graphics of people that look nothing like me. Right? And this is going to go into a, souvenir journal for a historically black college and a historically black fraternity. Right. And so that just didn't mesh. Right. And so, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Can we get some more inclusive pictures so that people feel like this caters to them? Right. And so it's about having those conversations and just making sure that people are comfortable coming in and frequenting your establishment, even if it's not in their specific wheelhouse.
Man. And that's why it's kind of great to work with people who look like you, because when you work with somebody that looks like you, they already know. And I'm not saying exclusively by any means, but when you do have people that look like you, they understand what your struggles are, what the pain points are. Sometimes they even understand what you're trying to accomplish. So it's so much easier for them to kind of get the vision. I do graphic design, and I remember working on something, and I always try to be inclusive. And I remember at one particular company I was working for, I had sent to design, and I think it was either a mixed family or a black family, and they were like, "Ooh, can we?" The word that they used was like, "Can we make this more Anglo?" I'm like, "What, you want me to get rid of black people?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to make sure that I'm inclusive, and it's like everything that I'm putting out, nobody looks like me, so it's like, all right, I'm doing this. I'm gonna push and try to make at least one of the people look like me. And it was a pain point, and they didn't get the problem. But it's like, I understand you got to play towards your audience. But
yeah, well, I mean, and that's where, like, as we elevate and become like the thought leaders in certain spaces, that's where we have to be intentional with that. I hate to do it, but I got a plug. I can't remember his name, but he does these black illustrations lists. If you just Google like black illustrations, it'll pop up. And so when you're doing like your PowerPoint presentation or designing your website, he has clip arts and graphics of people that look like us, right? And I think that that's important. Go out there and download a pack and help support that cause, because I think that that's awesome.
Yeah, that's for sure awesome. So it's funny because, like, you think about, I guess it's like an assumption, and I definitely don't want to make assumptions, but I'm guessing the person who had the ice cream shop didn't necessarily look like, they weren't our complexion, I'm guessing.
They did not look like us. They were cool. Okay. They just didn't look like us. Yeah.
I mean, because,
Good
like,
assumption.
I mean, it happens, I hate to make the assumption it happens, but, it's far less frequent than other cultures, I'll say.
Sure.
So, and I know that we talked before, and you said that it's not a ton of black people in franchising when you go to different events and whatnot. How do we get more black people into franchising? What do we need to do to get them into that push?
Well, I think having conversations like this, right, just having folks realize that it's obtainable, letting them know what the entrance strategy is so that they know from a capital perspective what they need, and that there are other people out there that look like them that are doing it. I think that's very therapeutic, right, for the conversation. So in my opinion, it's not, we're gapped, but it's not because of anything significant. It's just we need to focus on, some growth in that area. And through conversations like this and other podcasts and other platforms, I think we can kind of close that gap over time.
I think like the hardest thing is you start to think about traditionally where minorities rank in the kind of jobs that they can get, the kind of money that they have. A lot of times, people who look like us don't tend to have a bunch of disposable income to invest in things. I mean, at the same time, we do have, we are known for going and getting like really expensive shoes and jewelry as soon as we get some money. Like, what is the thought process that needs to change to say, like, instead of like maybe buying Jordans or like trying to get like a really expensive chain, like what is the correlation? Like, is that money the same, Like, is that the same kind of money that someone could invest into a franchise?
Yeah,
or do you need a lot more?
Well, so it depends, right? Franchises probably go on the low end from 5,000 up to a couple million. So it's all about getting in a level that you're comfortable in, right? But Jordans over time are a lot of money, right? I mean, most people that wear Jordans don't just have one pair, right? And they will pay, a premium amount for the specific pair that they like and the condition and the color that they like. And so you add that up over time and you could be looking at thousands of dollars in a shoe collection, right? nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not saying don't get Jordans. What I'm advocating for is for folks to maybe take some of that capital and invest it in something that's going to bring you some additional cash flow in. And then if you want to spend some money on discretionary income such as Jordans, then have at it, right?
Yeah, so you're saying like kind of hold that money up front, like save up and then invest in something that'll give you residual income.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that's kind of like the beauty in franchise is like you kind of put that money down. You put sometimes depending on the type of franchise from like what I know, I don't know as much as you obviously. But like from what I know, like from that initial investment and that initial, elbow grease that you put in at the beginning, because I know it varies depending on what kind of franchise you are. Like I think we've talked before about like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A wants you to have like a clean background. They want you to work there every day. Like your ownership is capped at a certain amount. You can only make a certain amount a year. Like that franchise is going to be different than like a UPS store.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how do you like? What does a typical like investment look like for a franchise? I know it varies, but like what can we look into as far as money and as far as time investment?
Yeah. So time investment is really going to depend on the type or the business model that you choose. The first type is called owner operator, which means you are the business. So think of a landscaper or a hairdresser. If they're not at work, they're not making money, right? They are the business. They're the entity, right, that people are paying for. Semi-absentee is a little bit different. This is where you're going to hire some folks to do the day-to-day operations. You're not going to be the face of the business. You're going to work in the background. Maybe you run payroll, do some marketing, take care of the hiring and firing and some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. But that allows you to keep your job and have this additional stream of income. So that's semi-absentee. By definition, you're going to be working anywhere from 5 to 20 hours a week on the business. I always tell people in the beginning it's going to be more, right? And then over time, you can kind of knock that number down to a comfortable range for you. And then the last example is like Shaq and LeBron James, those guys that own multiple franchises. I mean, those are multimillionaires, right? So they have a team in place. I can assure you that Shaq doesn't go to each of his restaurants checking on them, right? He has people that does that for him. So it's really about getting in where you fit in. So just like if we were looking for an apartment or looking for a house, right, to purchase, if you have no children, you may need a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom, right? If you have a bunch of kids, you're going to need a 5 or 6-bedroom house, right? And so franchising or business ownership is the same thing. There's certain criteria about the business that make sense for you. And what I tell my clients is come up with a non-breakable, unnegotiable list, right? So these are things that the business absolutely has to have before you invest. And then you don't move forward until that list is met.
That's good. It's always about lists and knowing what you're getting into beforehand. And you said like getting out. What you helped them get out?
Yeah, so I think get in and get out. And I don't mean like you're doing it overnight. This is not like we're flipping businesses, right? If you build a successful business over time, someone will pay you for that business, right? Because people don't want to do all of the things that you did, all of that blood, sweat, and tears. They just want to buy a business that cash flows. So I think when we're thinking about a business, we should also think about a potential exit strategy. What does that look like? For our people, I know a lot of us go into it thinking that we want to give the business to their kids, which is a great, mindset to have. But the numbers say that a lot of children don't want anything to do with their parents' business, right? So if your son or daughter grows up and says, hey, you've built a significant business, but it's just not for me. I want to, create my own path. You kind of have to respect that. You can't force them into it because it's going to be a horrible experience for everybody. So I talk to my clients about what that looks like as far as exit strategy is concerned, and being strategic with which businesses we invest in, because there's certain businesses that have a higher return when it comes to the sale of that business. And those are the ones that I like to focus on.
You just reminded me of I had a family friend over, older gentleman was throwing my aunt was having a going away party. She was moving, and he owns a landscaping business. And he's been doing this landscaping business for years, and he's ready to retire. He is the business. He's hired people. He has a crew, and now he's trying to sell his business. Right. And he said he started cutting back the days that he worked, like cut back the days of operation. And he said all that did was make it more busy. And he said people are like, they don't want to, like, no, he hasn't been able to get anyone to buy his business. And he wants to sell it. And he said he took the price down. He cut it in half. He's like, he's just trying to get rid of it at this point. Like, the thing that I've been hearing a lot is that it's a lot of people like him that are like maybe baby boomers a little bit after that have built up these businesses but don't want to. They don't want to carry them on. Their kids don't want to do them. They want to retire. They want to be done with the business. They just want to go sit on the beach. How do we approach those kind of opportunities effectively?
So I think making sure that you have something that someone wants to sell or someone wants to buy, it's really dependent on how you built it, right? And you know, from the example that you just gave me, it sounds like whoever bought that business would have to take on his role of doing that work, right? Whereas with the franchise, if you know that you want to sell it, you're going to make it so that I'm not doing any of the like labor. I'm not cutting the grass. I'm not edging those hedges and all of that stuff. I'm doing marketing, which you can outsource, right? You can pay a marketing company to do that and the business will still survive. I'm running payroll. You could pay a payroll company to do that, right? And the business will still survive. Or whoever takes on the business doesn't mind doing those tasks. So it's kind of like when you're building a house, you really want to be focused on the foundation. It's very similar in business ownership, right? The things, the tools and the infrastructure that you lay down in the beginning will determine, you know, the amount of success that you're going to have in the future and what that exit strategy is moving forward.
So two objections. Like if I want to, like, this is just an example. Like I just have two objections. I'm just curious how you get people over these objections. So I'll start out with the first one. Middle class family. You know, like we make a good amount of money, but we not necessarily enough to be like we're rich. We're upper middle class. We can do stuff. We can go on vacation. You know, we can buy nice shoes and we drive a nice car. I don't have the time for a franchise. Like, how do I make time between soccer practice, taking the kids to soccer practice, basketball practice, ballet, whatever it might be, working my 9 to 5? Do I need to quit my 9 to 5 in order to run a franchise? How does this work? How do I transition from one step to the other?
Yeah. So that's a big objection, right? Because folks, they have to have the bandwidth to do it. It's not, you know, I always tell people, we think you can just buy a franchise. You have to be awarded a franchise, which means the franchise company has to think that you not only have the money, but you have the wherewithal to run the business, right? So having some flexibility in your schedule is very important. That lends itself nicely for folks that work at home or have some like flexibility in their schedule, right? Maybe they have Fridays off or whatever it is. I mean, semi-absentee, again, 20 hours a week, even on the high end, that's only a couple hours a day, right? And if you put 4 or 5 of those hours on Saturday or Sunday, you're really only working an hour or two each day to get to those, 10 to 20 hours. So it's totally doable. When they say that they're, middle class, drive a nice car, go on vacation, but they're not, I mean, we're all trying to get to that next level, right? And the only way to get there, unfortunately, is to have an additional stream of income. So that's what's interesting about that semi-absentee piece. You're not giving up that $150,000 salary that you mentioned. What you're doing is saying, hey, I'm going to trade in some time and then hopefully can get another $150,000, and now you're looking at $300,000 in annual income as opposed to the $150,000. So that's why it's interesting.
It's interesting to me, and it kind of feeds right. That works perfectly into my second objection. And this is fictional. This is not from me. Like okay. This is not my objections.
Asking for a friend.
It's completely neutral. These are just scenarios.
Right.
So, Chris, everything you're saying sounds fantastic. I give a little time, a little bit of money, but it really sounds like magic. Mm-hmm. I think the thing about our culture is that it hasn't been enough financial leaders in our culture to really teach our people how money works as a large population. Mm-hmm. Not saying that those people don't exist. Like obviously, like you said a couple of them, like LeBron James, Shaquille O'Neal, Jay-Z. Like even just looking at some of the musicians and the basketball and football players back in the day, they would retire and go broke. And now they're starting to invest early and make sure that they have money for retirement. I feel like a lot of us don't always understand that the way the money works. Like, cause like put money under the mattress, put money in the bank, and like, but where does the bank put the money to be able to give you 0.0% a month off of what you made, which is actually losing money if you really understand the way that money works? How do you get over the objection that like doing a franchise, like giving a little bit of money and a little bit of time will actually start to lead to financial freedom? Like, cause it seems like magic if you don't understand it, because I feel like the more I learn about finances personally, now this is me, the more I learn about finances, the more it seems like magic. Like, wow, everybody doesn't know it doesn't seem legal. It doesn't seem right. It just seems like magic. Like, how does this work?
Yeah. So let's unpack something that you said, right? When you talk about these entertainers, let's take basketball players, they're making a lot of money, but they have a contract, right? And at the end of that contract, which is, for us, retirement age is 65. It's well before that for your basketball and NFL players, right?
Unless you're Tom Brady.
Well, unless you're him, right? I think he may come back. The Jets may get him over there. We'll see what happens. But what happens is it's not necessarily that they go broke. Some of them do go broke, but some of them just can't afford or refuse to go back to living without that money coming in, right? So you'd have to. And what's funny is, or not funny, what's unfortunate is the same thing happens to just regular working class folks like us, right? You get retired and now you're not bringing home the money that you were making, but you may still have a mortgage. You may still have car notes. You may still want to take vacations, right? Like your kids may be going to college or grandkids are going to college. And so in my opinion, it's about having cash flow that comes in even when I'm not working, right? My mentor and I call it mailbox money, right? You wake up and there's a deposit in your account or there's a check sitting in your mailbox, right? Like it's that passive income. Now, I hate using the term passive when it comes to franchising because it's not magic. Like you said, there is a lot of work that goes into running a business. And so, you got to get better. You got to have your financial situation in order. And you have to always be seeking some knowledge, right? I try to read one book a month. I try to, if there are any terminologies that I come across in a meeting, I try to, make sure I understand those if they're new to me. And so that's where we can get ourselves out of trouble by understanding that these opportunities exist. I mean, think about what franchising is at its face. Someone has figured out that there's a need for a product or service. They've refined that product or service to the point where they have sold it and made some money off of it. And not only that, they took notes on how they did it and are willing to give you that secret formula if you pay them a little bit in royalties, right? So all of this, like figuring out how to do it yourself, you can absolutely do it. It's just going to take you time and money. And so franchising, even though it's not magic, it reduces the time that it takes for success.
So if somebody is listening to this right now and they're saying like, Chris, I'm part of the way there. I'm so close, but I'm not quite ready to jump in. What are the things they need to do to prepare themselves for maybe like a year to 5 years down the line to maybe somebody's thinking about retiring or a mom is gonna take a step back, raise some kids, but she wants to be able to do something with her spare time, or maybe a father could be doing the same thing, but whatever it is, it's like 1 to 5 years from now, I think that'll be my time. What do I need to do in that time period to prepare myself to be able to understand how to run a franchise, how money works, how cash flow works, all of that stuff?
Yeah, so there's an old saying that like the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago and the second best time is today, right? Like, so there is no perfect time to open a business because life is always lifing. Like I can assure you that no matter when you decide to there's going to be some hurdle that comes up like because of it. It's just how life works. The interesting thing is if you decide not to do it, that hurdle is still going to come up, right? So you're going to have to deal with it anyway. I say a lot of it is about self-help, just figuring out where you're gapped. If you're not a real strong accountant, either hire someone or take some online courses on how to be better at that, how to understand like profit and loss statements and things like that. And then also selecting a good franchise that will fill in where you're gapped, right? There are some franchises out there that'll teach you all of the stuff that you need to know from reporting and all the financial stuff. I always say every good business owner needs two people specifically on their team. The first is an accountant and the second is a really good attorney, right? Those are the people that are gonna, number one, keep you out of jail. Number two, keep you from like having trouble with Uncle Sam and taxes, right? So you need those people on your team. Franchises, we don't look for people who have all of the answers. We look for people that have transferable business skills that they can bring to the table and couple that with some other people on their team.
That's really good. That's really, I could tell you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, man, I live, breathe, and eat this stuff, man.
So franchises safer than starting your own business. Would you say that? Is that a fair statement? It's a generalization. Yes, I know. Yeah. But in general, would you say it's safer if you're going to make an investment to invest in a franchise that's kind of proven or to invest in yourself?
Yeah. So there's always risk, right? I don't want you to get this notion that, franchises can't fail. They do, right? They can fail. The level of failure is significantly lower when you're investing in a franchise because of a few reasons. Number one, it's a proven commodity. It's worked someplace else. Now, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work in the area that you bring it in, but, there's certain things that are specific about, demographics and how the product or service is marketed that, lends itself nicely to being able to replicate that effort. So it is a little safer. It's easier to get funding for a franchise than it is for a self startup, right? Imagine, I don't know, like, let's just pick a business and say that you're going to start it and you're going to sit in a bank tomorrow and say, hey, listen, I know this isn't what I've been doing for the last 10 or 20 years, but I want you to give me $200,000 so I could get this idea out of my head on paper. Most banks are going to kick you out, right? Say, dude, what are you talking about, right? If you go to the same bank and say, hey, listen, I want to team up with this franchise that's been doing this for 15 years. They have 200 or 300 locations across the country. And if I bring my resources to the table with their expertise, this is what the projections look like. That's a totally different conversation, right? Think about a landlord. If you need brick and mortar, if you're going to be renting a space, if you're a landlord, who would you rather rent to? Someone who's just trying to figure this out for the first time or a franchise that has had some success over the last 10, 20 years, right? So there's a lot of layers to that onion. I tell people, if you have a great idea and want to work at it, go for it, right? If you're like me and great ideas are few and far between, franchising might be the way to roll. We always talk about not reinventing the wheel, right? Someone has a great idea, but more importantly, perfected the process and the infrastructure behind it, all of the systems and processes. That's what you're paying for. Like, you don't invest in McDonald's because they make the best burgers, right? We've all hopefully I can't speak for you. I know I can make a burger better than McDonald's, right? Now, what I can't duplicate because they're just light years ahead is, their real estate arm, their marketing arm, their accounting arm, their financing arm, their ability to leverage capital. That's what you're investing in. The burgers and fries are just kind of what they use, right? Like, that's just a tool.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just because it takes time to build up that brand recognition too.
Yep.
And you can have a great product and somebody not know the name of it and they don't want to try it just because. Yeah. I mean, take it to something simpler. I remember this is probably dating me, but I remember when the Zoom player was the thing. Microsoft had Zoom, and they had a subscription service where you could listen to unlimited music. That was new. That was before Spotify. Right. It was before Apple did it. It was like Microsoft did it way back in the day. It was like Rhapsody and then Zoom. Right. But it kept recommending an artist to me. It kept you would like this guy, Wale. You would love listening to his music. I'm like, I'm not listening to no Wale. Like, who was this Wale guy? Well, who was this guy? Right. And, just because I didn't know who he was or had never heard of him, I hadn't heard any features of him, I was very reluctant to listen to his music. And when I finally listened to it, he became one of my favorite artists ever. Like, his first album was one of my favorite albums of all time. It's just like a classic. But so it's just that business has spent that time building that brand recognition, having people trust for good and bad. I mean, things can change, especially in today's age of social media. Something can change overnight. I remember also dating myself, Chi-Chi's was a Mexican restaurant. You might, like, if you're younger than I am, you might remember, you might see Chi-Chi's in the store and be like, oh, that Chi-Chi's sauce. Like, yeah, I've seen they have sauce and stuff. They used to have a franchise. They used to have restaurants all over the place. And I watched Chi-Chi's close overnight. Like somebody died from eating at a Chi-Chi's, and Chi-Chi's, this was before social media. The internet wasn't popping like that. Like, it just, Chi-Chi's is closed.
Yeah.
So brand recognition is important, and being able to have something that's like you can duplicate is important too.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about objections, that's one that I get a lot from clients, right? I separate franchises into two things. So you have like your starter brands, like, just a startup company. They have less than 50 units across the country. And then you have your established brands. And sometimes when you talk about those startup brands, people are like, oh, no, that, and I'm like, well, there is some additional red tape you have to go through for a startup brand. But remember, at one time, McDonald's had one location, and now look at it, right? So it's really important to look at trends. And when to me, numbers don't lie, right? Like, the metrics are what's important. And that's a better idea than of going into business because you can see year over year growth, as opposed to what I hear all the time. I like the Polynesian sauce, right? Like, that's a horrible reason to go into business. And I like Chick-fil-A. I'm not saying that they're a bad company. I'm just saying if you're going to invest, it should be for something other than the Polynesian sauce.
Chick-fil-A has great marketing. I don't want to dunk on Chick-fil-A too much because I'm not necessarily a fan of some of their politics and some of their beliefs and whatnot. But, like that's from what I know about franchising. That would not be the thing that I would want to, that's not the franchise that I want to go to, even though they have great marketing. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to that effort that you would want to put into it. They want you to put your life into owning your Chick-fil-A.
Right. 40 to 60 hours and up, right? That's what you're going to be doing. Most people I know want to work less, right? I don't come across too many people to say, I don't mind making good money, but I want to work a lot, right? I just don't hear that too often.
No, but their franchising setup is a little bit different because they really, from what I remember, they assume all of the like costs up front. They like build the building and all of that. Correct. So it's like you don't necessarily even own the franchise. You kind of just run the franchise.
Correct. Yeah, they're paying you to run the business, keep people motivated, do the hire and fire, and follow their model on a local level. But you're right. Like you're not spending money on the furniture. You're not spending money on any of the equipment that you need. You don't own the building. So, it is what it is, right? It's out there for someone who wants it.
Yeah. So for those people who are ready and they are looking for the opportunity, what are some things that they should look for to find the opportunity that best fits them?
So I have this tool and I could share it with you. It's created by some data scientists. It's very similar to like a personality assessment, but it's for entrepreneurship. And it'll tell you what type of companies that would be interested based on your profile. Right. So each of us are, different. Like the business that would be perfect for me may be horrible for you and vice versa. And what's interesting is that franchise companies use this data to figure out who their top performers are in the network. And then they go find more people like that. Right. Because, those are people that are going to drive revenue. And when you make money, the franchise makes money. It's a match made in heaven. Right. So they want people that are going to come into the network and do well. Some things that I would particularly look for. I mean, I love recurring revenue. Those are my two favorite words in business. I like recession resistant businesses. And then up until 3 years ago, I now like pandemic resistant businesses. Right. So that was a new word. But, there's certain businesses that just meet that criteria. Certain industries that just bode well. As long as the earth is spinning, we're going to spend money on pets. We're going to spend money on our children. We're going to spend money on mom, dad, auntie, uncle, or seasoned saints, we used to call them in church, right? We'll spend money on our homes and our cars, right? Like when times get tough, instead of buying a new car, you'll put old tires on that, or you'll put new tires on that old car and keep the party going, especially if you don't have a car note, right? Yeah, exactly. I always tell people when there is a hole in your roof, you're not shopping around too much, right? Like whoever can get there and get the job done. Like, I live in Florida, right? When the AC goes out, there's not much conversation. Whoever can put that van in my driveway first and get my AC up and running, that's who I'm going with. So there's certain businesses that just lend itself nicely to those type of investments. And so it's just important for folks. I think the biggest nugget I would tell people is don't assume that the business is going to be wrapped in a nice little bow the way you want it. Sometimes the business that you're looking for isn't packaged the way you thought it would be. And that's okay if it's a product or service that you don't mind selling. Like, I'm not asking you to do anything that's against your morals. And number two, money is green, right? So if you're going to make money and it's a valuable benefit to the society, then why not?
I mean, you can't compare it, like, cause you don't know what the other side is, but have you found more obstacles, or has it seemed like there's been more obstacles for you as you start to want to invest in franchise being Black? Have you found any resistance? Has there been any franchises that have been like, hey, like, you don't fit the profile of the kind of person we want running, like, because franchises can reject you, right?
Absolutely. So I haven't come across that in my experience, at least. And if I have come across it, I haven't noticed it, but I won't say that it's not there, right? So and that's something that we have to negotiate. Like, when I talk to other people that look like me that are in the space, like my buddy Nate, he and I, we met at a discovery day for a franchise that we both decided to invest in. Didn't know each other from a can of paint, but you walk in that room and there's 20 people in there and it's you and another brother. Like, naturally you gravitate towards each other and try to figure out, like, hey man, like, make sure this ain't like a get out situation, right? The little teacup, right? So, the folks that I have been, involved in, and maybe I'm lucky, blessed, whatever you want to call it, have been looking for not only just diversity when it comes to skin color, but also diversity of thought. So they're looking for people that come from different backgrounds, share different experiences, because guess what? It doesn't matter what the ownership looks like, right? You have to cater to your clients and your particular demographic, right? And so if there's certain nuance that the ownership doesn't know about, that's something that I can share with them if I'm at the table, right? And they will value my opinion because they'll be able to look in those reports and see how many people look like me are, their customers, right? Their clients are paying money. So they're going to want to get that expertise. So I haven't, experienced any, upfront, like, out in the face racism. The covert stuff is a little harder to uncover. And, sometimes you don't find out about that till years later. And that's normally in the case of, like, maybe spending or paying more for a loan because the bank, charge you a higher percentage rate or something like that. Or could be a landlord asking for additional security deposit, right? I mean, there's a bunch of studies out there that show that it costs us just more to live life and run a business. But, I haven't experienced anything that says, I got to get out of this thing because it just isn't for me.
Actually, it makes me think of that movie. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it had Anthony Mackie and Samuel L. Jackson, and it's on Apple TV, and they bought a bank.
I remember I saw that movie back in the day, and the black guy couldn't, like, be on the bank, so they got a white guy to be the face of the bit. I remember that movie. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah,
I can't remember the name of it either, but it's highly recommended. It's on Apple TV. Yeah, and like one of the things that was crazy was the guy owned the apartment. He was doing work on the apartment, and he said the police got called on him and like, they're saying that you own the apartment. He's like, I actually do. He's like, I keep a extra copy of the deed just, in case there's any misunderstanding.
That's right.
So you kind of think about that kind of stuff. I wonder if there's any objections for some people. That might be an objection. Like, I'm worried about trying to fit in. But I think, like what you said was perfect, that a lot of these companies, they don't really care about anything but the green. Green is the color that they care about.
Right.
And if you can help them get green, then they're gonna love you to a point,
Absolutely.
So, what's some of the best ways to learn more about franchising?
I think podcasts, just talking to people in the industry. I have a bunch of contacts and I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I know who has the right answers. And so I think that that's very important. I'm willing to share that with my clients and folks that I come across. But if you're interested in it, there's so much content out there and listen, it's the internet, so you can't believe everything you consume. But you know, a lot of it is good. Just validate what you're getting. But there are podcasts, there are audiobooks, there are hardback books that you can read. And I would just say, talk to people that are in the industry because they have those experiences and those experiences are real.
How do you get to people in the industry? Like, can people reach out to you like on your website or anything like that?
Absolutely. They can get to my website, my LinkedIn, you know, see me in the supermarket and we could talk about franchising. Yeah.
If they can find you in the supermarket,
right.
You have a podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
So my podcast is called Winning Franchise Formula. So it's on, you know, Apple Music, Spotify, all of that good stuff. And we just talk about different franchises out there. We interview people that are in the space, not necessarily franchise owners, but maybe franchisors or attorneys, loan people, you know, anything to help you just understand what that process is. So look up Winning Franchise Formula and give me a couple likes. I'd appreciate that.
I'm trying to get him on YouTube. I'm trying to get him to do the video. He had his background, like if you listen to this and you're not seeing the visual, his background is already set up for it. So he might as well just go ahead and just take the plunge, like do like I did. Just go ahead and put your video on YouTube.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the editing, that's when I'm going to be like, why did I listen to Richard?
Oh, the editing's easy. I told you, write it off as a business expense. Have somebody edit it for you. There you go. You're done. And you're helping with the economy. You're giving somebody a job, you know?
That is true. Hopefully I get to that point. I'm going to keep grinding on this podcast. And if we get to, you know what, I'm going to set a mark and say, okay, if I hit this, then we'll advance the video. So I'm only like 15 episodes in on the podcast. So
I got you. You're still pretty early. We don't want you to pod fade. But
no, we're not going to do that. I got a couple in the clip already. So
the thing is that with the kind of stuff that you're talking about, a lot of that stuff is evergreen. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are going to be able to use this information. You talk about transferable skills, and you know, being able to understand. One, if you don't know what transferable skills are, it's being able to understand what a transferable skill is being like you worked, like my mom worked as a secretary for years and years and years. And then it's like, you know, a lot of times you don't have secretaries anymore. But her transferable skill is that she knew how to type. Right. She could type really fast. So she could take that and be a typist. You know what I mean? Correct. So it's being able to take something like problem solving. Like I do this thing and it's not a big deal, but you're doing it. When I was in college, I remember a lot of people got a psychology degrees. Mm-hmm. And everybody was thinking like, their objections were, you're going to get a psychology degree. If you really want to do something with it, you need to get a master's. But what they didn't understand is that psychologists, people hire them in marketing because they want to understand how the customer works. So it's like being able to analyze people. It's not just good to be a psychologist, it's good to be a marketer. Right. So it's being able to understand those skills.
You know, and when you talk about transferable skills, we like to make business more complex than it really is, right? When it comes down to it, you need to make money and manage expenses, right? And if you run a household, whether you're single, married, kids, no kids, you're doing the same thing in your personal life, right? You get a certain amount of money from work and you're allowed or you have to allocate money for living, money for a car, money for vacation. And so we're running our own individual businesses on a smaller scale, right? But if you can do it for yourself, you can do it for a business. When we have a job, we are running a business for someone else, right? Like you might work in sales. So you're running that sales department or that call center or whatever it is. And so we like to overcomplicate it, but it's really not that. It's not easy, but it's not complicated.
I think some people run their home businesses better than others. Like
absolutely,
some people pay their bills late, whether they're forgetful. Sometimes you can't even pay your bills on time. So, right. You know, like it's something that I think it's for some people it comes easier. Like for me, growing up, the way that I saw other people handle money and stuff like that, it made me want to understand how it works so I wouldn't have that blind spot. Right. And it's like kind of like anything when you got to spend time with it. And I think you made this point earlier it's like finding where your weaknesses are and then working on your weaknesses. Not saying like, oh, that's just me, I'm just bad with money. It's like, no, like pick up a book about money. Or if you don't want to read, get an audio book.
Right.
You know, just find something that'll help you learn how to become better at the thing that you're bad at, whether it's time management, whether it's like managing your funds. Maybe it's like you just like Starbucks a lot and you just you got to give up like one of your Starbucks drinks a day. You know what I mean? Like,
or
like
Jordans.
Whatever it is finding that spot.
Right. I mean, and the thing is, I mean, you mentioned that some people are better at doing their personal finances than others, and some people are better at running businesses than others, right? I mean, there is no magic way to do things. Each one of us has a certain, like, kind of like the guy from Taken, a certain set of skills that, right? Like, and, you know, but I think what's important is finding out where you're gapped, which you just mentioned, and then, like, if there's something that I either don't find joy in or, it just is a chore for me to do it, then I outsource it, right? I could cut my own grass. I don't. Right? Like I pay a landscaper to do that, right? And you know, so I think it's the same thing in business. I'm not my own accountant. Yeah, I could get QuickBooks and do all of my debits and credits. It doesn't bring me joy. I pay an accountant to do it.
That reminds me of something that I like to say is that why would you spend time doing something that you're bad at if you have the extra capital to pay for it and you can spend more time doing the thing that you're good at? Because you're going to be more efficient at the things that you're good at. Absolutely. Instead of struggling through the things that you're bad at. If it takes an hour for a landscaper to do your lawn and it takes you 2 hours, but you got the extra capital, you can spend that 2 hours doing something that brings you more joy or more money.
Right.
But like for me, like I cut our lawn, I cut my family's lawn. I'm cutting it because I don't want to pay anybody to do it. Like I have a lawnmower, I'm gonna cut it. Like. And plus, it gives me peace. It's good exercise. Like, you know what I mean? Walking
Mental
through the
health
line,
is important. There you go.
Good 30, 40-minute exercise. You know what I'm saying? Then go trim the bushes, you know.
Right.
But I mean, to each their own. Like, it's so many different ways. But I think for me, always getting over the hump, the thing that whether it's giving up something or whether it's going to do something, I think whenever sometimes a lot of times we find ourselves at a crossroad, and it's say like, ooh, I'm tired of like. My thing is, it's like, oh, I want to lose some weight. So, like, in order to lose weight, that means I need to eat better and I need to work out more. And like, until the want for me to lose more weight is stronger than the want for me not to work out and not to eat whatever I want to eat, then I'm gonna still be where I am. So it's like finding that tipping point that moves you from one end to the other, like maybe giving up something, maybe starting to do something. I hate to read, but I need that knowledge. So it's like I gotta find that motivation. Like for me, it was audiobooks. Like I hate to read, so it's like I go get an audiobook. I can work and listen to the audiobook, maybe listen to a podcast. This is a way to kind of find, because one size doesn't fit all, just like a franchise. One size doesn't fit all, but it's like finding the thing that works for you. I think is very important.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we think that like business moguls are made overnight, right? At some point, you know, and we hear this all the time, you know, I've never run a business before. Yeah, well, Bill Gates or, you know, pick whatever business exec you want. At some point, this was their first business, right? So we all have to start somewhere. And I think that we don't take advantage of realizing how important incremental growth is, right? So in your example about wanting to lose weight, if you're doing nothing today and decide to walk for 10 minutes tomorrow, that is more beneficial than the nothing you did today, right? And if you can get consistent with it, at some point, those 10 minutes start to matter, right? Like 10 minutes over the course of whether it's a month, 6 months, a year, it starts to add up and then you start to see the difference, right? So same thing with business ownership. Like you said, get a podcast, get an audiobook. There's so many ways to consume content now. I mean, back in the day, we had just an encyclopedia, right? And that was it, right? Now, I mean, we've got...
You're just as old as me.
Listen, I remember them encyclopedia salespeople coming to the crib and mom and dad saying, yeah, we getting a news. We already got one. Well, what we get? This is the new version, right? Like,
that's updated.
That's right. This one is in color. So, you know, now we have phones in our hands that have like all the information in the world at our fingertips. That's right. So, just get out there and do it. I say stop making excuses, but I get it, right? I made excuses for many years. You brought up a good point. Like when you talk about pain, I had a mentor that used to say, and he would break it down and say, if you have a toothache, but you're afraid to go to the dentist, you won't go to the dentist until the pain of that toothache is more than what you're going to experience at the dentist. And that's when you'll go. And it's the same thing for business ownership. For me, it took, 3 layoffs before I was like, all right, I gotta do something. Right. For some people, it's getting passed over for a promotion at their job or just not feeling like they're getting compensated for the work that they're putting in. Mm-hmm. But that pain looks different to all of us. And when it reaches a certain threshold, that's when we'll take action.
And I even think about like now the fight for 15 and how wages aren't really always livable with inflation now. And like it's so many people striking, like UAW striking. Right. There's been countless nurses and doctors going on strike over the last few years. And I say UAW, the writers, the actors, like everybody is striking because they're trying to get compensated. And the fight for 15 is real. Like everybody you should be able to work a job and have a livable wage. Right. So it's important for us to be, if we have the ability, if we can do it, to at least try to make like extra income for us and our family. Because not only that, if you bring a franchise into the community and it's successful, it gives you the opportunity to run a business better than you think other people are running it. Gives you a chance to employ other people and try to make it so that they have a livable wage. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's like not just talking about it, it's like it gives you an opportunity to actually do it and make a difference. And it's like a difference that you'll be able to see right away.
What's funny is I didn't really think about any of that going into business. I knew I wanted to bring a good product to the community. So my first franchise was a Pilates studio, right? A boutique fitness. And so Pilates is healthy. Yes, we're going to help people get in shape, recover from injury and all of that stuff. An unintended consequence was the staff people that I had, right? I had 40 people between 2 locations. Wow. Me taking that chance on business ownership helped them put food on their table, right? Which I didn't take that lightly. I thought that was awesome. And then you hear the stories about people who were, husband passed away or there was a divorce and they used Pilates to feel better, like whether it's physically, mentally, whatever it was. Those were awesome. But then the last one that I really didn't even pick up on was, as a business owner, you get to decide who works for you, not necessarily staff, but your accountant, the person that cleans your facility, the exterminator, right? All of these things. And I like to pick people that look like me, right? And so now I'm helping another small business owner, bring in additional revenue and then do all of the things that I just mentioned in their world, right? So that to me was just awesome. Like when I love going to a place and seeing, my attorney and, my cleaning lady and all of that stuff, it just makes you feel good.
You can definitely make a difference and you can definitely bring people with you. I just think about like even, it was a story that I heard I think it was on a podcast, and he started like a rental car, like on like a Toro business. He bought like 40 cars, 20 cars or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, I bought these cars and then I had to figure out where I'm going to store them. And then he said I had to like figure out how I'm going to get them clean. And he said he started to build relationships with other business owners and like being able to have like carte blanche to be able to be like, I want somebody who looks like me, someone like, that I can relate to, that relates to and understands the struggles that I have. That's such a, I think that like if anything, like what is going to push me back to motivated, I'm going to get ready for my franchise and I'm going to call you. I'm like, Chris, I'm ready for my franchise. When I'm ready to open my franchise, it'd be like, yes, I can help empower more people that look like me. Not only can I help empower other people, like you think about like certain jobs, teenagers, one of the best ways to like encourage young Black youth, and I talked about this before, is by doing it and seeing, like letting them see that you can do it. And that's like one of the reasons why I thought like, it's a movie and you think, it's just a movie, it's just a movie. The original Black Panther was so important because it wasn't a black movie. It was a big budget superhero movie where everybody except for a couple people looked like us.
Right.
And like for the first time ever, like kids all over the world like that were brown and black, and they were like, man, I can be a superhero. We didn't have that before. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had like Meteor Man and stuff like that, but you know, that didn't have the budget. Like that didn't have the budget. We had Blade, we had Blade too, but you know, it was completely different. And I just think it's important to continue to help us to continue to grow together as a culture.
No, one of my homegirls from like 3rd grade posted something on Instagram today where it was a black lady that sat in first class and she didn't think anything of it. She was traveling, getting to where she was going. And a little black girl, you know, was walking through the plane and saw her in first class and just kind of gave her this look like was, you know, okay, I see you, right? And, you know, I think just showing up is so important, right? And just showing someone that, listen, I did it, you could do it. You know, there's no, I don't want to say there's no magic, but, you know, there's a formula that you can follow. And if you get in front of the right people and do it the right way, then you can duplicate that success. So, yeah, I get it.
Man. Well, look, Chris, I had a great time talking to you. Thanks for all the information. I'll make sure I put all your information in the show notes.
Appreciate you, man.
So again, I'd like to thank Chris for coming on the show. If you'd like to learn more about him and the things that he's doing, including his podcast, that information will be available in the show notes. Still Talking Black is a Crown Culture Media LLC production. You can find out more about the show at stilltalkingblack.com. But until next time, keep talking.